Okay, so in section 3, we're going to talk about a new shape, which are called ellipses. And this is going to just be the first part of ellipses, because they can be either centered at the origin, so 0, 0, or not. For today, we're just going to focus on the ones that are centered at the origin. So all of these centers are going to be 0, 0. And so we're going to talk about how do you find the different pieces to graph an ellipse. Now, an ellipse is similar to a circle in that it's kind of like a round shape, but it's a little more oval-like because it's stretched. And it's either stretched over the horizontal axis or the vertical axis. And I'll tell you how you differentiate which is which. So on an ellipse, we have some of these points that we're going to be finding, such as like the vertex. We'll be finding 2 like vertexes for the ellipse. And we'll also be talking about co-vertices. So on like this one that's laying on its side kind of, these points up here at the top would be called co-vertices. And this one down here would be called the same. And then for the other axis, you have like the same setup. It's going up and down instead of laying on its side. We also have things called foci. So these would be 2 other points that we can find inside of the ellipse, or sometimes they'll be like later on in shapes, you'll see where they kind of start changing when it's like on a hyperbola instead. When we're talking about a major axis and a minor axis, major axis is the one that the ellipse kind of gets stretched over more. So it's either going to be laying like on its side, so it's going to be the long way on the horizontal axis, or it's going to be standing up and it's going to be on the vertical axis. And that changes based on where a certain number or a certain value is on your equation. And then, like I said, your focus points or your foci, those are going to be at C. So they're going to use these letters like A and B and C to kind of talk about these different things. So A always refers to the major axis, B refers to the minor, and then, like I said, C refers to those focus points. So down here, we have this chart, okay, that has kind of 2 different major axes. So your major axis is either horizontal or it's vertical. And for these ones, it's all based off of the A value. So A should always be the bigger number. So what I mean is when you're looking at your 2 equations, so they're going to look like one of these 2 forms. On the bottom of the fractions, you're going to have 2 numbers. Whichever one is bigger, that's going to be your A value. So if the first fraction has the bigger number on the bottom, or the second fraction has the bigger number on the bottom, that's going to be where your A value is. And then it's either going to switch from the horizontal axis if they have the x squared over that. So if x squared is over the bigger number, then your major axis is going to be the horizontal axis, because it's going to be laying on its side and stretched over that one. If the y squared is over the bigger number, then it's going to be a vertical major axis. So it's going to be standing up and it's going to be kind of tall. To find your c squared, because c squared goes into c, which helps us find our focus points. I think there's a typo here. This should be a squared minus b squared. So you'll want to change that in your guys' chart. So you'll do your a squared, the bigger number on the bottom of the fractions, minus the other number, and that'll be your c squared. To then find just c, we'll have to square root that number. Chances are pretty likely that you're going to get a decimal for that, because we're talking about points on the graph. Not everything's going to be perfect on whole numbers. To find your vertices, you take your a value, so you have to square root the a squared. And then to find your co-vertices, you take the square root of your b squared. And like I said, depending on what axis we're working with, like if it's the horizontal or the vertical, it changes how you write your vertices and your co-vertices. So you can kind of see like the vertices on the horizontal one, it's a first and then 0, where on the vertical one, it's 0 and then the a. So it kind of switches based on which axis we're having the major part of the ellipse be on. So I'm going to show you guys some examples here so you can kind of get an idea of how you differentiate and then how you use the chart. So the first one I have says x squared over 36 plus y squared over 16 equals 1. So the first thing I do is take a look at those bottom numbers, 36 and 16. Identify the bigger number, which is the 36. Okay, so 36 is going to be your a squared term, and 16 is going to be your b squared term. Now, since a squared above it has x squared, 36 has x squared above it, coming back up here, that means that we're going to use this side of my chart, because x squared is above the a squared in that formula. So to find my vertices, my covertices, and my foci, I'm going to use all of this stuff from the left-hand side. That's how I differentiate which part of the chart I need to use. So what I'm going to do first is find like my a and my b, because I have to use just a and just b, not a squared and b squared, to do my vertices and covertices. So a squared is equal to 36, and b squared is equal to 16. That means then that my a would be just the square root of 36, so that's going to be plus or minus 6. And my b is going to be the square root of 16, so that's plus or minus 4. So coming back up here to my chart, just for a quick second here, my vertices are plus or minus the a value and then 0. So coming down here, I said that my a value was 6. So my vertices, you're going to have positive 6, 0, and you're going to have negative 6, 0. Because it has that plus minus sign in front, which means that there's two different points. You've got to go negative 6 and positive 6. Now for the covertices, on the left hand of the chart there, it says 0 plus or minus b. So that would be the 4. So we're going to have 0 positive 4 and 0 negative 4. Okay, and now what I want to do is find my c value so that I can find my focus points. So the c values, I have to figure out what c squared is first, using the a squared and the b squared. So like I said, this is where we subtract. So we're going to do 36, that's my a squared, and I'm going to subtract b squared, which is 16. And so I get 20 for c squared. So for just c, we're going to square root 20. And this is where you're going to get a decimal, so you're going to have to round it. So on my calculator, I'm going to do the square root of 20. And if I round, because it's 4.47, so I'm going to round to 4.5. So then to write my foci, coming back up here, foci is plus or minus that value 0. So just like the vertices were, where I had 6, 0, negative 6, 0, I'm going to have positive 4.50 and then negative 4.50. All right, so if we look here, here's the pieces of information that I'm going to have to graph now. My vertices, my covertices, and my foci points. Okay, and once I have these graphed, then I should be able to kind of sketch in what my ellipse is going to look like. Okay, so I'm going to start with my vertices. So I have one at positive 6, 0. That means that that's on the x-axis. So this ellipse should be laying like on its side, and it's stretched over the x-axis. So I'm going to go to the right 6, and I'm going to go to the left 6. Okay, and so these are my vertices. And if it helps you, you could like label V, V on your graph so that you know those are your vertices. Now, co-vertices are 0, 4, and 0, negative 4. That means that from 0, 0, you're going up 4 and down 4. So these are my co-vertices. So I usually label that with CV. Remember, my center is there in the middle at the origin. Okay, now once you have your vertices and your co-vertices graphed, you can pretty much sketch in the ellipse. Like this would be like the top half, and there's the bottom half. So you could go ahead and sketch that in, and then just graph those focus points. So 4.5, 0, so you're going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4.5 to the right, and that's one of my foci. So I put a little F next to it, and then I go negative 1, 2, 3, 4.5. As you guys start graphing these, it's not required that you label them like, V for vertices, CV for co-vertices. Like, I'm just showing you where those points are at on this ellipse so you can kind of see. This one, from the vertices, it's stretching over that x-axis. So that's why we used the left-hand side of our chart. Because the horizontal axis, which would be your x-axis, is the one that it's being stretched over. Okay? And really, that's all there is to graphing it. I think the hardest part is identifying the pieces. Like, once you figure out where your A and your B are, everything else from there, you just go to the chart. But you just need to know what side of the chart to use. Okay, let's do another one together. Let's take a look at the second one here. Okay, so look at those bottom numbers. Which one's bigger? 9 or 25? Which one's bigger? 25. So the bigger number is always your A. Okay, so the 25 is what we're going to call the A squared, which means that 9 is my B squared. So now take a look at the A squared. So take a look at the 25. What letter is sitting above it? The Y. So that means we're going to use the right-hand side of our chart from up above. Because that one, if I scroll back up to that, that one has Y over the A squared. So that tells us that the major axis is going to be vertical. So this ellipse is going to be sitting upright, and it's going to be stretched over the Y-axis. So we're going to use the left-hand side. Everything that we did before is the same as far as like finding your A and your B and your C. It's just how we write our vertices, our co-vertices, and our foci. It's like flipped. It's the opposite direction from what it was on the last one. Okay, so A squared is 25. So what does that mean regular A is going to be? 5. Yep, square root of 25 would just be 5. Now, if B squared is 9, what is B going to be? 3. All you're doing there is you're square rooting those numbers. Okay, you took the square root of 25, square root of 9. So to write my vertices, we're using the right-hand side of my chart here. So the vertices are 0, and then your A value. So my A values are positive 5 and negative 5. So we would do 0, positive 5, and 0, negative 5. Now co-vertices, that's when we use our B value. So co-vertices are the plus or minus B, and then 0. So we're going to do 3, 0, and negative 3, 0. Now we got to find C so that we can do our focus points. So C is when we do A squared minus B squared. So we're going to do 25 minus 9. What is 25 minus 9? 16. So this one actually is going to work out nicely for us. We're not going to have a decimal for this one. because to find c, we're going to do the square root of 16, which is going to be plus minus 4. So then we can write our foci points now. So the foci on the right-hand side of the chart is 0, and then your positive and negative c value. So it's going to be 0, positive 4, and then 0, negative 4. Okay, and then again, now that we've got all that information, what I need to graph are my vertices, my co-vertices, and my foci. So vertices, we're going to go up 5 and down 5. Okay, and again, that's because it's being stretched over the y-axis this time. That major axis is vertical. Co-vertices are 3 and negative 3. Okay, remember our center is in the middle there. You can go ahead and draw the ellipse in now. And then do your foci. So foci are going to go up 4, down 4. The foci should always be on the same line as your vertices. Like those two things should be connected to each other. So you should always, when you're graphing them, be going in the same direction that you graphed your V points at. Now if you don't, go back and check and make sure that you went the right direction with one of them. So those should always be on the same one. But this would be what this ellipse looks like. So there's one more on the back side of this page, and I want you guys to try it. So take a couple minutes and try to find all of that information, your A, your B, everything, and graph it. All right, so the first thing I did was identify my a squared and my b squared. A squared is always the bigger number, so for this one it's going to be the 4. Which means that my a is going to be 2, and my b is going to be plus minus 1. Now, for identifying like which side of the chart I should use, since 4 right above it has the x squared, that tells us that the major axis is going to be the horizontal one. So it's going to be laying kind of on its side again, and it's going this way. So what we're going to do is use the left-hand side of the chart. So to find my vertices, that's when you do your plus minus a values and then 0. So it's going to be 2, 0, and negative 2, 0. For co-vertices, you're going to go with your b value, but you're going to do 0 and then your b value. So it's going to be 0, positive 1, 0, negative 1. Now we got to find our c. So c squared, we take a squared minus b squared. So that would be 4 minus 1, which is 3. So then to find c, I need to square root 3. So again, we're going to have to round this one. So it rounds to about 1.7. So then to write out the points for the foci, what we do is we take that c value, positive and negative, and then we put 0. So it's going to be positive 1.70 and then negative 1.70. And then we're going to graph, like I said, our vertices, our co-vertices, and our foci. Those are things that I need to see on the graph. All right, so vertices are at 2, 0, and negative 2, 0. Again, center is at 0, 0. Co-vertices are at 0, 1, and then 0, negative 1. So we should be able to sketch in our ellipse here. And then those foci points you're going to have to estimate. It's 1.7 and negative 1.70. So again, you'll just have to kind of roughly guess where you think those would be. Since it's a decimal, you can't necessarily be exact on the graph.